The moment our commander said, "No mercy in sparring," he unknowingly gave the most dangerous student in the academy permission to stop holding back. I have served as a tactical observer at the Orion Coalition Military Academy for nearly 19 standard cycles, and I believed I understood every species that walked through our training halls. I knew which cadets relied on speed, which depended on brute strength, and which ones folded the instant pressure found them. Humans, however, were supposed to be simple, small, predictable. At least that was the official briefing. Caleb Hayes arrived exactly 3 minutes before first assembly, carrying nothing except a worn training bag slung over one shoulder. About 6 feet tall, pale skin, short brown hair, calm blue eyes, and an expression that looked more curious than nervous. If you ignored the file marked Deathworld origin, you could mistake him for an ordinary exchange student visiting the wrong campus. Most of us did exactly that. Around him stood cadets from worlds where evolution had favored armored hides, reinforced bones, towering frames, and natural weapons. Compared to them, the Earthborn boy looked almost disappointingly average. The whispers began before he even reached the center platform. Someone behind me laughed. Another cadet asked whether Earth had sent a maintenance assistant instead of a fighter. Even I found myself wondering why Command had approved such an obvious mismatch. Commander Varric Thorne stepped onto the elevated platform, his blue-gray armor reflecting the arena lights, as complete silence spread across the chamber. Every cadet snapped into formation. Every conversation stopped. His reputation alone was enough to straighten spines. "Today," he announced, his voice echoing through the stadium, "you will learn the difference between practice and survival. Sparring is not theater. It is preparation." Hundreds of eyes remained fixed on him. Then his gaze swept across the rows until it landed on Caleb. The commander paused just long enough for everyone else to notice. A slow grin appeared across several alien faces. Nobody wanted to stand where the human was standing. "There will be no mercy in today's exercises," Varric continued. "If you hesitate because you fear embarrassing your opponent, you have already failed." A ripple of excitement spread through the arena. Those words meant restraints would be removed. It meant every cadet could push harder than usual without earning disciplinary action. Around me, instructors nodded with approval. The strongest students rolled their shoulders, eager to prove themselves. Caleb simply adjusted the strap on his bag and looked up at the commander with the same quiet expression he had worn since entering the room. No bravado, no challenge, no nervous fidgeting, just steady attention. That unsettled me more than confidence ever could. Commander Varric pointed toward the central combat circle. "Everyone will remember today's lesson," he declared, "especially our visitor from Earth." The laughter returned, louder this time, bouncing off the metal walls until it sounded less like amusement and more like certainty. Standing among the observers, I almost joined them. After all, what chance did one quiet boy from a death world have against the Academy's finest warriors? I would discover the answer sooner than I ever wanted. The Academy assigned every new arrival a threat index before they were allowed to enter advanced combat training, and the results usually matched reality with comforting precision. Heavy gravity species ranked near the top. Armored species followed closely behind. Fast species earned respect because they compensated for their smaller frames with extraordinary reflexes. Caleb Hayes received a score that immediately became the source of quiet entertainment throughout the observation deck. Several cadets leaned over their data tablets, exchanging amused looks as the number appeared beside his name. One even whispered that the system had probably confused the Earth student with a civilian exchange program. I checked the profile myself. Height, just under 6 feet. Weight, 180 pounds. No biological armor. No natural weapons. No enhanced skeletal plating. The assessment concluded with the phrase, "moderate physical potential. Recommend additional supervision." If I had trusted paperwork more than instinct, I would have accepted that judgment without hesitation. Commander Varric ordered the first evaluation group into the preparation zone, while the remaining cadets gathered around the elevated combat circle. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering, nearly 100 feet across with adaptive flooring capable of adjusting traction, impact resistance, and simulated environmental conditions. Above us, drones floated silently, recording every movement for tactical review. Every student wanted their performance archived. Every student believed today would improve their reputation. Caleb quietly placed his training bag against the arena wall, folded his academy jacket with surprising care, and stepped onto the platform wearing only the standard combat uniform issued that morning. He stretched his shoulders once, rolled his neck gently, and stood completely still. No dramatic breathing, no exaggerated warm-up. He looked less like someone preparing for competition and more like someone waiting patiently in line. That simple composure drew more attention than any display of confidence could have. Beside me, Instructor Zelker laughed softly. "He does not even realize what is coming," he said. Another observer pointed toward Caleb's hands. "Look at those fingers. No claws. No reinforced joints. He could not even grip a proper combat blade." Around the arena, the jokes multiplied. One cadet offered imaginary betting odds. Another suggested reducing the training gravity so the human would not become exhausted too quickly. Caleb heard every word. I know he did because several comments echoed clearly across the chamber. Yet he never looked toward the crowd. His eyes remained fixed on the empty center of the ring, as though everything outside that circle simply did not matter. That silence slowly became uncomfortable. It was not fear. It was not arrogance. It was discipline, the kind usually found only in experienced veterans. Commander Varric noticed it as well. His expression hardened for the briefest moment before returning to its usual confidence. "Bring forward the opening challenger," he commanded. A towering alien cadet named Draxon stepped into the light, standing nearly 8 feet tall with broad shoulders and dense muscle shaped by generations of life on a crushing high-gravity world. The audience responded with immediate applause because Draxon had not lost a training match in almost 2 years. Several students glanced from the giant warrior to the quiet human and smiled as though the outcome had already been decided. Caleb simply offered a polite nod, planted his feet shoulder-width apart, and waited without saying a single word. For reasons I could not explain, that calm began to worry me far more than the giant standing across from him. The arena lights dimmed as the academy system announced the beginning of the first official evaluation, and every conversation dissolved into an uneasy silence. Commander Varric raised one hand, and the transparent barrier surrounding the combat circle shimmered to life with a low mechanical hum. A holographic display appeared above the ring, cycling through environmental settings before locking onto standard combat conditions. Then the commander frowned. He touched the control panel again and increased the gravity setting by another 20%. A few instructors exchanged satisfied nods. Draxon barely reacted. The giant alien simply rolled one shoulder and smiled with obvious confidence. Caleb Hayes shifted his weight once, almost too subtly to notice, then settled back into the same relaxed stance he had maintained since entering the arena. That tiny adjustment drew my attention immediately. It was not the movement of someone struggling with increased gravity. It looked more like someone testing the floor before taking a casual walk. Commander Varric folded his arms behind his back. "The purpose of this academy," he announced, "is not to produce impressive recruits. It is to produce survivors. Excuses do not survive. Hesitation does not survive. Weakness does not survive." The words echoed through the massive chamber while every cadet listened without blinking. Draxon answered with a respectful nod. Caleb simply listened. He never interrupted. He never challenged the speech. His breathing remained slow and perfectly steady. That alone began to irritate several instructors standing beside me. They expected nervousness. They expected uncertainty. Instead, the human looked almost patient. One instructor quietly muttered that the Earth student probably did not understand the seriousness of the situation. Another suggested he was frozen with fear. I found myself wondering if either explanation was correct. Commander Varric stepped toward the edge of the platform and addressed both competitors directly. "This evaluation ends only when I determine that one cadet has demonstrated unquestionable superiority. Hold nothing back within academy regulations. Adapt. Learn. Earn your place." Draxon answered immediately with a loud acknowledgement that echoed across the arena. Caleb responded with a simple, calm, "Understood, Commander." His voice carried no emotion beyond quiet respect. Somehow that made the entire exchange even stranger. The drones descended lower, circling the arena from different angles as thousands of tactical sensors activated at once. Every movement would be measured. Every reaction would become part of the permanent academy record. Students leaned forward against the observation railings, eager to witness the inevitable opening exchange. Several of them had already begun predicting how many seconds the newcomer would last. Someone confidently declared that the match would end before the first minute expired. No one challenged that prediction. Draxen slowly approached the center marker, stopping exactly where Academy protocol required. Caleb mirrored the movement from the opposite side with the same measured pace, stopping at the exact prescribed distance as though he had practiced the routine for years. For the first time that morning, Commander Varric narrowed his eyes. The human had perfect positioning, perfect balance, perfect discipline. Those were not the habits of an inexperienced exchange student. Those were the habits of someone who had spent countless hours preparing for moments exactly like this. Standing only a few yards apart beneath the bright arena lights, the towering alien and the quiet boy from Earth waited for the opening signal, while an entire academy prepared to witness what everyone believed would be a simple lesson. None of us realized we were about to learn one instead. The starting signal echoed through the arena, and every spectator expected Draxen to seize control immediately. Instead, the towering cadet remained still for a heartbeat, circling with measured confidence as though he wanted the audience to appreciate the difference in size before the evaluation truly began. Caleb Hayes matched the movement without hurry, his footsteps light, balanced, and almost effortless despite the increased gravity. From the observation deck, the contrast looked almost absurd. One competitor carried enough natural strength to intimidate an entire room simply by standing there. The other appeared like an ordinary young man who had wandered into the wrong training hall. The audience interpreted the silence as hesitation. I did not. I recognized patience when I saw it. Draxen finally made the first move, advancing with disciplined precision instead of reckless aggression. It was a textbook academy opening, designed to pressure an opponent into revealing habits, weaknesses, and timing. Caleb responded with only a small adjustment of his stance, turning his shoulders slightly while keeping his eyes fixed on Draxen's center line. The motion was so economical that several instructors dismissed it as instinct rather than training. Commander Varric, however, watched without blinking. He had stopped looking at the size difference. He had started watching the details. The distance between the two competitors closed until only a few feet separated them. Draxen tested the range with a controlled forward movement, expecting the human to retreat. Caleb did not move backward. Instead, he shifted one step to the side so smoothly that Draxen's line of approach no longer pointed toward the center of the ring. The adjustment lasted less than a second, yet it forced the larger cadet to reset his footing. Murmurs spread through the crowd. It was a tiny exchange, hardly worth mentioning on most training days, but experienced observers immediately understood what had happened. Caleb had surrendered no ground while quietly taking away his opponent's preferred angle. Draxen's confident smile faded just enough for me to notice. He began circling again, this time with greater caution. Around the arena, the laughter that had followed Caleb since his arrival became noticeably quieter. Several students leaned closer to the railing, trying to understand how someone with no visible advantages had already disrupted the rhythm of one of the Academy's strongest cadets. Caleb never celebrated the moment. He simply waited. His breathing remained calm. His posture never became tense. It looked as though he had all the time in the galaxy. Commander Varric finally spoke for the first time since the signal. Continue. His single word carried across the arena with unmistakable authority. Draxen acknowledged the order immediately and increased his pace, attempting to regain the initiative through speed rather than size. Caleb answered with another perfectly timed step, maintaining the same distance while quietly guiding the movement toward the outer edge of the combat circle. Only then did I understand what I was witnessing. The human was not reacting to the match. He was shaping it. Every adjustment encouraged Draxen to move exactly where Caleb wanted him to go. The tactical display floating above the arena suddenly highlighted an unexpected statistic. Energy expenditure favored the larger cadet by a widening margin, while Caleb's readings remained remarkably steady. Instructor Zelkerer frowned at the numbers, then checked the display again as though expecting a malfunction. There was none. The Academy computers rarely made mistakes. For the first time that morning, uncertainty spread through the observation deck instead of confidence. We had expected to watch a newcomer struggle to survive his first evaluation. Instead, we were watching an experienced champion slowly realize that the quiet boy from Earth had entered the arena with a plan long before anyone else understood there was a game being played. The Academy prediction models updated every 3 seconds during a live evaluation, and for the first time in years I watched the probability graph behave in a way none of us expected. Draxen had entered the arena with an overwhelming advantage according to every measurable category, yet the tactical display no longer reflected certainty. His projected chance of victory slipped a few points, then a few more, while Caleb Hayes remained almost unchanged. Nobody spoke at first because nobody wanted to admit the computers might be seeing something we had completely missed. Draxen noticed the shifting numbers as well. His confidence had not disappeared, but it had become something more cautious. He stopped relying on intimidation and began studying the human with genuine concentration. Caleb did not acknowledge the display at all. He looked only at his opponent, quietly observing every adjustment in breathing, every shift of weight, every subtle movement of the shoulders. It felt less like watching a student and more like watching an experienced tracker reading footprints across unfamiliar ground. Commander Varric stepped closer to the arena boundary, his sharp eyes following every exchange without interruption. "Do not hesitate," he called toward Draxen. "Control the center. Force the pace." The instruction echoed across the chamber, and Draxen obeyed immediately, increasing the pressure with disciplined footwork designed to leave fewer escape routes. The strategy was sound. It had defeated countless opponents before. Yet Caleb responded with remarkable simplicity. Instead of resisting the pressure, he flowed around it, changing direction at exactly the right moment until Draxen once again found himself standing slightly farther from the center than he intended. The movement looked effortless, almost casual, but the arena computers immediately highlighted another increase in efficiency for the Earthborn cadet. Around me, instructors stopped making jokes. Data analysts began recording additional notes. Even the drone cameras adjusted their positions, giving more attention to Caleb than to the Academy champion. One of the younger observers whispered that the human had not made a single unnecessary movement since the evaluation began. Another quietly answered that conserving energy was impossible under the increased gravity unless someone had trained under even harsher conditions. That single comment spread through the observation deck faster than any rumor I had ever heard. Could Earth really produce warriors accustomed to environments even more demanding than this? I remembered the file describing Earth as a death world, but until that moment it had sounded like little more than an interesting classification. Suddenly it felt like a warning we should have taken far more seriously. Draxen changed tactics again, refusing to repeat the same approach twice. That decision earned an almost invisible nod from Caleb, as though he respected the adjustment. Then something happened that transformed the mood of the entire academy. Caleb smiled. It was not a mocking smile. It was not arrogance. It looked like quiet appreciation, the expression of someone finally facing a challenge worth respecting. Draxen hesitated for only an instant, but that instant was enough for every experienced observer to recognize the shift. The giant warrior was no longer testing the newcomer. He was trying to solve him. Standing above the arena, Commander Varric slowly folded his arms, his confident expression replaced by thoughtful silence. I had served under him for many years, and I knew exactly what that look meant. The commander had stopped evaluating an exchange student from Earth. He had begun evaluating a warrior whose true limits remained completely unknown. Commander Varric lifted one hand, signaling that the evaluation would continue without interruption despite the growing uncertainty spreading through the observation deck. That decision surprised many of us. Normally, once an unexpected pattern appeared, instructors paused the exercise to review the data. This time the commander wanted answers more than caution. Draxen inhaled slowly and changed his approach again, abandoning the patient exchanges that had allowed Caleb Hayes to dictate the rhythm. Instead of chasing the human across the arena, he began cutting off space with disciplined positioning, forcing every possible path to become narrower. It was the strategy of an experienced competitor who understood that winning often depended more on controlling options than displaying strength. Caleb noticed the adjustment. Immediately, for the first time since the match began, he nodded with visible approval. It was a small gesture, but everyone saw it. Somehow that quiet acknowledgement unsettled the crowd more than any display of confidence could have. The Earthborn cadet looked genuinely pleased that his opponent had finally adapted. Around me, instructors stopped watching the competitors individually and started watching the arena map instead. The tactical display revealed something remarkable. Caleb was not simply reacting to Draxon's movements anymore. He was predicting them. Every route Draxon selected had already been abandoned a fraction of a second before the larger cadet fully committed. It was as though the human had memorized the Academy's combat doctrine before ever setting foot inside the building. Instructor Zelkerer finally broke the silence. "Pull his entrance file," he whispered to one of the analysts. "I want every recorded exercise from Earth." The analyst hesitated before answering quietly. "There are almost no combat recordings attached to his transfer packet." Zelkerer frowned. Then where did he learn this? Nobody had an answer. Commander Varric continued studying Caleb without speaking. His expression no longer carried even a trace of amusement. The commander had trained elite officers from dozens of worlds, and I realized he was searching for recognizable patterns in the human's movement. He found none. Caleb did not resemble any Academy style. He did not fight like the heavy gravity species. He did not move like the agile species. He did not imitate military doctrine from any civilization represented in the coalition. Whatever he had learned belonged entirely to Earth. Draxon finally committed to a carefully timed sequence intended to pressure Caleb toward the arena boundary. Spectators leaned forward, expecting the human to lose his carefully managed positioning for the first time. Instead, Caleb pivoted with astonishing efficiency, using only a single step to reverse the geometry of the exchange. Suddenly Draxon found himself drifting toward the edge while Caleb occupied the strongest position in the entire arena. A wave of disbelief rolled through the observation deck. The Academy computers immediately recalculated control percentage, awarding the advantage to the human for the first time since the evaluation had begun. The number glowed across the overhead display, impossible to ignore. Even the cadets who had mocked Caleb earlier stared in complete silence. No one laughed now. No one whispered about his size. Their attention had shifted entirely to one unsettling question. If this quiet student had revealed so much while still appearing completely relaxed, how much had he chosen not to reveal? Commander Varric slowly clasped his hands behind his back and spoke with a calm voice that carried across the arena. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting." It was the first genuine compliment I had ever heard him offer during an opening evaluation, and every instructor standing beside me understood its meaning. Caleb Hayes was no longer being measured against Academy expectations. From this moment forward, the Academy itself would be measured against him. An unfamiliar silence settled over the Academy after Commander Varric spoke those final words. It was the kind of silence that only appeared when certainty disappeared. Every instructor, every cadet, and every analyst continued staring at Caleb Hayes, searching for some hidden explanation that would make the impossible feel ordinary again. None came. The arena display completed another tactical cycle, and the prediction model shifted once more. For the first time that year, the Academy champion no longer held the highest probability of controlling the engagement. Draxon noticed the change immediately. His eyes moved from the display back to Caleb, and I saw something I had never expected from him during a training evaluation. Respect. Not fear. Not frustration. Respect. He lowered his center of gravity and abandoned every movement that had earned him victories against other cadets. Instead of relying on Academy doctrine, he began adapting in real time, carefully studying the human's posture before committing to each step. Caleb responded with the slightest nod, as though he appreciated seeing an opponent willing to learn instead of relying on reputation. The exchange lasted only a moment, yet it completely changed the atmosphere inside the arena. This was no longer a demonstration between a veteran student and an underestimated newcomer. It had become a contest between two minds attempting to solve the same puzzle from opposite directions. Commander Varric slowly walked along the edge of the combat circle without taking his eyes off either competitor. "Continue adapting," he instructed calmly. "The first one who stops learning loses." His voice remained steady, but every instructor recognized that this lesson was no longer intended only for the two cadets inside the arena. It was directed at every person watching. Caleb answered with a quiet, respectful glance toward the commander before returning his attention to Draxon. He still had not spoken more than a few words since entering the academy, yet somehow his silence carried more confidence than long speeches ever could. Draxon gradually increased the tempo again, combining disciplined footwork with carefully timed changes of direction. The movement was faster now, cleaner, and noticeably less predictable than before. Several observers believed the adjustment would finally disrupt Caleb's rhythm. Instead, the human responded with the same remarkable economy that had defined every second of the evaluation. One smooth pivot, one measured step, one subtle shift in balance. Nothing dramatic, nothing flashy. Yet every adjustment left him exactly where he needed to be before Draxon arrived. The tactical drones began highlighting Caleb's positioning in blue, indicating optimal movement efficiency. I heard several analysts quietly debating whether the system calibration had malfunctioned. It had not. The numbers kept confirming what our eyes were struggling to accept. Caleb was spending less energy while maintaining superior control of distance, timing, and space. Then something even more surprising happened. Draxon paused just long enough to lower his hands in a brief gesture of acknowledgement before resetting his stance. It was an old warrior tradition from his homeworld, reserved for opponents who had proven themselves worthy of complete focus. A wave of astonishment spread through the observation deck. An undefeated academy champion had publicly recognized a first-day exchange student before the evaluation had even concluded. Commander Varric noticed the gesture as well. His expression remained unreadable, but his next command revealed everything. Suspend standard assessment protocols, he ordered the academy staff. From this point forward, record every movement for advanced tactical review. Around the arena, instructors exchanged stunned looks. Standard reviews were archived for students. Advanced tactical reviews were reserved for techniques considered valuable enough to teach future officers. Without realizing it, Caleb Hayes had already begun changing the academy before the first evaluation had even reached its conclusion. The Academy Recording Network continued collecting every second of the evaluation as if history had quietly changed direction without asking anyone for permission. Commander Varric remained perfectly still beside the arena. Yet even from the observation deck, I could tell he was reconsidering assumptions that had guided his career for decades. Caleb Hayes stood across from Draxon with the same relaxed posture he had carried since entering the training hall, showing no sign that the attention of hundreds of cadets and instructors had altered his focus. Draxon slowly exhaled and offered a respectful nod before taking another measured step forward. There was no mockery left in his expression. There was only determination. The next exchange unfolded with remarkable precision. Both competitors adjusted their footing, tested distance, and responded to each subtle movement with disciplined restraint. It was less like watching a contest and more like watching two experienced strategists solve an increasingly complex puzzle without speaking a single word. Every decision carried purpose. Every adjustment revealed another layer of preparation. The tactical display reacted immediately, highlighting an almost perfect efficiency score beside Caleb's name. Analysts throughout the observation deck leaned closer to their consoles, comparing the data against decades of archived academy evaluations. Nothing matched. His movement patterns were unique, conserving energy while steadily increasing positional advantage. Instructor Zelkerer quietly admitted that he had never seen the academy algorithms classify a first-day cadet as an instructional reference before the evaluation had even concluded. Around the arena, conversations that had begun with laughter ended with careful observation. Students who had expected an easy demonstration were now taking mental notes, studying Caleb's timing, patience, and discipline. Even those who still believed Draxon might regain control understood they were witnessing something rare. Commander Varric finally addressed the arena once more. "This evaluation has exceeded its original purpose," he said calmly. "From this point forward, every cadet will observe before participating. Learning begins with attention." No one questioned the order. The atmosphere had changed completely. Caleb acknowledged the command with a simple nod, never allowing confidence to become arrogance. Draxon responded in kind, recognizing that his greatest challenge was no longer proving his own strength, but understanding the principles guiding the quiet human standing opposite him. That realization spread through the academy faster than any announcement. Earth had not sent its largest soldier, its loudest champion, or its most intimidating warrior. It had sent someone who demonstrated discipline before confidence, patience before speed, and precision before force. As the arena lights reflected across the transparent barrier, I realized the lesson unfolding before us had never been about determining who could overpower whom. It was about discovering that the greatest advantage often belonged to the competitor who remained calm while everyone else relied on expectations. Looking around the observation deck, I saw expressions that had completely replaced the laughter from earlier that morning. Curiosity had become respect, and respect had become caution. For the first time since Caleb Hayes walked into the Orion Coalition Military Academy, nobody was asking whether a human belonged in the arena. They were asking a far more important question. If this was only the beginning of his training, what would he become after learning everything the Academy had to offer, and were we truly prepared for the answer? When the evaluation finally concluded, the arena remained silent for several long seconds because nobody seemed willing to become the first person to speak. The tactical displays slowly faded, the recording drones returned to their charging stations, and the transparent barriers surrounding the combat circle dissolved into the floor. Yet no one moved. Hundreds of cadets continued looking toward Caleb Hayes as though the academy itself had quietly become a different place. Commander Varick stepped into the center of the arena, his measured footsteps echoing across the chamber. Every instructor expected a lengthy analysis of techniques and performance. Instead, he looked first at Draxon, who answered with a respectful nod that needed no explanation. The Academy champion had gained something more valuable than another victory or another statistic. He had discovered a competitor who forced him to improve. Commander Varick then turned toward Caleb. The young man from Earth stood exactly as he had at the beginning of the day, calm, attentive, and respectful. There was no celebration, no boastful speech, and no attempt to draw attention to himself. That composure impressed me more than anything else I had witnessed. "Cadet Hayes," the commander said, his voice carrying through the silent arena. "Your evaluation is complete." Caleb simply answered, "Thank you, Commander." Once again, there were no unnecessary words. Commander Varick paused before continuing. "Your record will not be filed under exchange student assessments." A ripple of surprise spread across the observation deck. That classification had existed for generations without exception. Your performance will be archived as advanced instructional material for future officer candidates. This time, even the instructors exchanged astonished looks. Such recognition was almost never granted to someone on the first day of academy training. Caleb acknowledged the decision with a quiet nod, accepting it with the same humility he had shown from the moment he arrived. Draxon stepped forward and extended a hand in the traditional gesture of mutual respect used by his people after an honorable contest. Caleb accepted the gesture without hesitation. The applause that followed did not begin with the instructors or the commander. It began with the cadets who had laughed earlier that morning. One after another, they stood and applauded until the sound filled the enormous training hall. It was not applause for domination. It was applause for discipline, preparation, and the willingness to challenge assumptions. As I watched from the observation deck, I realized that every briefing I had ever read about humans had focused on physical measurements, environmental statistics, and biological comparisons. None of those reports had explained what truly distinguished them. They trained patiently before anyone noticed them. They respected worthy opponents. They remained calm while others relied on reputation. Most importantly, they never assumed that yesterday's achievements guaranteed tomorrow's success. Commander Varick dismissed the assembly, but very few cadets left immediately. Many remained standing, quietly discussing footwork, decision-making, patience, and tactical awareness instead of size or strength. The Academy had expected to teach one student from Earth. Instead, one student from Earth had reminded the entire Academy that the greatest lessons often begin the moment certainty disappears. As I completed my official report that evening, I changed a sentence that had remained unchanged for 19 standard cycles. It had once read, "Humans possess moderate physical potential." I replaced it with something far more accurate. Never evaluate a human by appearance alone. Watch how they think, how they adapt, and how they continue learning when everyone else believes the lesson is already over.